Welcome to the France 24 debate. It's 30 years since the first Oslo Accord, a move that was touted as unprecedented at the time for peace in the Middle East. An accord that saw the Israelis and the Palestinians sign a document that led to the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. In this image you can see in the centre there, Bill Clinton, either side, Shimon Peres, Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, I'm being corrected by our guest here in the studio who we'll meet in a moment. And among them too, Mahmoud Abbas, who is today still the leader of the Palestinian Authority. So Bill Clinton there overseeing all of this, the idea of a two-state solution then written on paper and signed. 3 decades on, we're examining the success or failure of this Oslo process, named of course after the city where it was all put together. Our panel to discuss the issues that this raises. Joining us from Tel Aviv, Yossi Belin, the Israeli negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Yossi, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Joining us from Hebron in the West Bank, Huda Abarukob, who is the regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Huda, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Here in the studio, Ofer Bronstein, political advisor and president of the International Forum for Peace, former advisor to Yitzhak Rabin, project manager for Israeli-Palestinian rapprochement under the aegis of Emmanuel Macron. Thank you, sir, for being with us here in the studio.
Good evening.
First, our correspondent Iris Makler sets the scene.
For the past year, Rachel Orbach has been living on this plot of land with her 6 children.
This is the garden we've started to build. We planted trees and installed a sprinkler system.
She built her modest home in the hills east of Ramallah. Even the State of Israel considers this place an illegal outpost. But Rachel hopes that Ma'oz Esther will be legalised and will become part of the nearby settlement.
I live here out of ideology. People like me who live here don't want to live in a luxury villa, simply in nature. But yes, soon, God willing, this will be an official village.
Settler leaders have presented a new plan to the Prime Minister. They want to increase construction in the occupied West Bank, to build hospitals, trains and an airport. Their aim is to double the number of Jewish settlers by 2050.
To get 1 million Jews here, what the government needs to do is, firstly, stop preventing us from building our homes. Secondly, build infrastructure for this place to be inseparable from the country of Israel. That's how it has to be.
The Palestinians say settlement expansion is burying the two-state solution promised in the Oslo Accords they signed 30 years ago. Out of economic necessity, thousands of Palestinians work in Israel or in the settlements. In the evening, they pass through checkpoints to go home.
Oslo brought nothing new. Instead of moving forward, advancing our lives, it's caused everything to decline. There's no solution. The settlements have taken the land and the roads. Every time there's a security incident, all the surrounding roads and checkpoints are closed to everyone.
The United Nations warns settlement expansion could lead to Israel's de facto annexation of the West Bank.
Iris Makler, our reporter there. Iris Makler, of course, based in Jerusalem for France 24. Let's bring in our guests to talk about the success or failure of the Oslo Accord of 1993, starting with, joining us from Tel Aviv, Yossi Belin, the Israeli negotiator of the Accord. Yossi, good evening to you and thank you for being with us. What sense do you have now, 30 years on, about the success or failure of the Oslo Accord?
There is no question. I mean, I don't think that anybody can say that Oslo is a success. Oslo is a failure. And the failure is that it is still with us. I mean, my original idea was to help both sides to bridge the gaps in the negotiations that they held in Washington between the Israeli delegation and a Jordanian Palestinian delegation in the context of the Madrid conference. Now, since it was frozen, there was a dead end in the negotiations. I believe that if we have a secret talks somewhere in the world in which we can try to bridge the gaps, then it would be possible to finish these negotiations and get to the interim agreement according to the guidelines of the Madrid conference. I was very happy that during this secret talks about which I told my superior, Shimon Peres, and my Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, only after we had the first paper, that we could go to the first phase and then perhaps even earlier negotiate the permanent agreement. But what happened is that the rightist governments in Israel used the interim agreement actually as a permanent one. And this is the disaster, because on the one hand, it became a kind of a deluxe occupation. The world is paying for the needs of the Palestinians rather than the occupier, which is us. And the governments of the right continued to put settlements in the West Bank and even in Gaza before we left Gaza. So rather than ending the Oslo process on May the 4th, 1999, which was the deadline for the interim agreement, it never ended. And this is the big failure.
Yossi, for now, thank you very much indeed. Do stay with us. Let's bring in from Hebron on the West Bank, Huda Abu Rakab, Regional Director for the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Huda, thank you for being with us. Your sense about Oslo 30 years on. We heard there from Yossi, his feeling that it's been an abject failure. What do you think? How do you see it?
I completely agree with Yossi, and this is not just Yossi's opinion. If you talk to Palestinians in the streets here, especially young Palestinians who are under 30, you know that it failed. It started as us Palestinians focusing on the vision, and the Palestinians, the Israelis focusing on the details when it comes to security, reaching to a point where a young Palestinian who is under 30 has not experienced any kind of peace indicator on the ground in Palestine. Oslo is an equal to failure and a loss of hope, and also it's a loss of, in many ways, dignity and this fire that we had as Palestinians for our rights.
And in terms of, Huda, just to stay with you for one more question before we move on to our other guests, in terms of what has gone wrong, obviously you feel, and I think the evidence stacks up and shows, the Palestinians have clearly suffered immensely.
Of course, as a consequence of the lack of having an honest broker, the lack of no mechanism whatsoever to monitor the agreement, the failure of the leadership on both sides to even engage in negotiations for 30 years, this added to the suffering of the Palestinians, plus the fact that the Palestinians cannot have their own voice in what's happening. And I think this is one of the biggest issues now, especially among young Palestinians, is that they have no voice. And it's not just adding to the suffering on daily basis. This government is not new in its policies in the West Bank. Let's remember in 1995, this government, the people who represent this government, are the ones who killed and assassinated Rabin in 1995. And this is what accumulated in more suffering for the Palestinians, more violations of human rights, and no accountability whatsoever.
Huda, for now, thank you very much indeed. Another guest just joined us from Jerusalem, Michael Kobi, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies and Senior Lecturer at Ariel University in Israel. Michael, thanks for being with us. We've heard from both Huda Abu Rakab and Yossi Belin about their feelings about the failure of the Oslo Accords. I'm asking you the same question about how you feel about it, but can you add something to us as to why you feel this hasn't worked?
Good evening. First of all, a small correction. I'm not from Ariel University. I'm affiliated with the INSS, Tel Aviv University, Professor Kobi Michael.
Sorted out. Thank you.
Now, with regard to your question, I would say that, first of all, I would like to distinguish between the essence of the Oslo process, or the organizing rationale of the Oslo process, at least from the Israeli point of view, and the process as a process, okay? Because these are two different things. Now, I think that there is no doubt, as Dr. Belin said, that the process as a process eventually has failed. But I think that the essence of the Oslo process, the idea of having two independent entities living side by side, the idea of separation between the populations, the idea of stopping control the daily life of the Palestinians, I mean the Israeli control on the daily life of the Palestinians. I think that in this regard, the Oslo process, the Oslo concept has succeeded. And I think that the idea that the majority of the Israeli constituency, the Jewish constituency, is still in favor of the concept of two states, or the concept of two entities, the idea of a sort of separation between or disengagement between the Palestinian population and the Israeli, the Jewish population. The idea that there is still a broad support is something that is yielded from Oslo, and in the very same time, one of the ultimate outcomes of the Oslo process is the existence of the Palestinian Authority with all of its problems. We have a Palestinian Authority that rules the daily life of the Palestinian constituency, the Palestinian people, at least something like 95% of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And I think that this is an achievement, unfortunately, an achievement that was not used successfully by the Palestinians themselves from the first beginning, from day one of the Oslo process. But it is a very essential platform.
Michael, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in our guest here in the studio, essentially Emmanuel Macron's Middle East peace envoy. I think that's a fair way to describe you, sir, isn't it? Offer Bronstein, frequent visitor to France 24. We always appreciate your contributions. Let me just give you that praise, because it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm wondering how you've listened to what everyone's had to say, and I think we've had some great input so far. I'm wondering what your take is on the whole situation regarding the Oslo Accord. I mean, clearly we heard from Michael there's a sort of mitigated success in some way, but Yossi Berlin and Huda Abu Rakab quite categoric that they think it failed.
I have a tendency to be an optimist. And it's true that we know what failed in Oslo, because as Joseph Berlin said, we should not be still talking about Oslo. Oslo should be only a paragraph in history, but we are still there. So it showed that it failed. But at the same time, Henry Kissinger said once that the Israelis don't have a foreign policy, they have only an internal policy. And I think that one of the reasons of the failure of the agreement was the internal political life in Israel. Nobody, I think that one of the big mistakes of Oslo was to say we're going to take 5 years, we're going to start confidence building, we're going to create a Palestinian Authority, we're going to share security responsibility, we're going to sign the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord in 1994 for the economical agreement. And then in 5 years it will be a Palestinian state. Nobody, not in the Palestinian side, not in the Israeli side, took in consideration that maybe 5 years after, in Israel won't be the same government. Maybe 5 years after, Yasser Arafat will disappear as well. So nobody took it in consideration, and it's exactly what's happened. I think that we miscalculated the strength of the extremists on both sides, and we saw how violent they were. Daily terrorist attack from the Hamas in the heart of the Israeli cities. A terrible, which one of the reasons that Hamas retaliated, a terrible massacre in the Abraham Mosque in Hebron by Dr. Goldstein. So we were not aware of how strong they were, and we were not aware, we didn't take it into consideration how resilient they will be. And the last thing that nobody could have imagined, that on the 4th of November 1995, someone, on behalf of a group of people who did not act alone, will kill Prime Minister Rabin. And I remember the first statements of Arafat when Rabin was killed. He said, the peace process is over. He understood that his partner for peace process was an honest man. A yes was a yes, a no was a no, was always straight with me, and he understood that Rabin leaving the political scene in Israel will jeopardize the willing of both people to make peace. Saying so, And Professor Koppel was absolutely right. Let's look at the glass half full. We have economical tide. We have to review it. Now we are working on reviewing the Paris Agreement on the economical exchanges and tide between the both parties, but it exists. A Palestinian. Let's not forget that a few minutes before Oslo, it was out of law in Israel to speak to PLO people. Whoever was speaking to PLO people under Shamir government was going to jail. Today, the best partner than Israel, even under the right-wing government of today, the best partner of Israel is the PLO. The PLO is considered as being very legitimate by everybody. So this is a good thing. The second thing, what was important in Oslo is that both sides recognized the right of the other one. The Palestinians, for the first time, recognized Israel as a right of the Jews to have their own state, and the Israelis recognized the Palestinians to have dignity, freedom, and their own state. And I think that that's capital, and this did not change. And that's, I think, the most important contribution to Oslo. Now, let's see another aspect of Oslo. Everybody is and I am one of them, very happy that the fact that Israel is normalizing relationship with the Arab world, which is great. We saw the first people to go to Morocco a couple of days ago was the Spanish and the Israeli to go help Morocco in this terrible situation they are facing today. But I don't forget the 13th of September 1993, when we left Washington at night, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we landed in Morocco. We landed in Rabat. El Al airplane, half of the Israeli government, received by the King Hassan II. Yitzhak Rabin, who had a lot of respect for the Muslim, going to the very fantastic mosque in Casablanca. Now it's Hassan II mosque. At the time it was Mohammed VII mosque, taking off his shoes to honor the Muslim. And let's not forget that one of the most important peace agreements that was signed between Israel and its neighbor, because of the double recognition between us and the Palestinians, was the peace agreement with Jordan. Today we have an agreement with Jordan due to the agreement that was signed in Washington. And so we have an Israeli flag in Rabat. We had an Israeli flag in Tunis. We had diplomatic relationship with Mauritania. We had an Israeli flag in the Emirates. We had an Israeli flag in Qatar. So what we are talking about, if all of that did not happen, today's Abraham Accord would have not been possible. So we did have a test of what peace can be between Israeli and Palestinian, between Israeli and the Arab world.
So do you feel that has all happened because of the Oslo Accords?
No doubt.
That's basically
no
the
doubt.
first step towards what has happened.
I have no doubt.
Okay.
Without this historical check-ins between the two leaders, it would have not happened.
Let me pause you off. Let me bring in again Yossi Berlin, who's one of the negotiators of the Oslo Accords. Yossi joining us from Tel Aviv. Yossi, thank you for waiting with us, and I hope you've been able to hear clearly what the other speakers have been saying. Your opinion clearly is key to this debate, and I'm wondering what you feel about what has happened since and what happens going forward, because clearly we're at a situation where back in 1993, and I recall this as a young journalist, being very optimistic about what happened then at the time, thinking with the sort of the passion of youth that this might try and sort something out for one of the big stories on the world scene. It hasn't, clearly, and we've seen obviously in the interim years lots and lots of problems, and we report on these almost every day. Yossi, do you feel that we're getting towards any kind of resolution, or are we set with this depressing cycle of violence?
God forbid, we will not accept it and we will not comply with it. And those who believe in peace, as the people whom you are interviewing just now in this program, are not going to give up, neither on the Palestinian side nor on the Israeli side. The point is that my original intention was to make peace, and I agree with all what Ofer said right now. I really appreciate what he said, because it is the right list of positive things which happened as a result of Oslo. But in many ways it is a byproduct, and the main product has not been achieved. Does it mean that we are not going to have peace? No. I think that we can have peace, and you know that Huda and myself are involved with the idea of an Israeli-Palestinian confederation which will allow Israelis to live in the Palestinian state rather than evacuating them, which might be very, very difficult for any Israeli prime minister, so that the same number of Palestinian citizens would be allowed to live in Israel in the legal status of permanent residence. And this is not part of the solution for the refugees, which is different. So I believe that another government, not this government, I don't think that the current government of my country is a partner for any peace deal, because any peace deal will be involved with the partition of the land, and this government is not going to have any partition. But I hope that it won't take too long before another government will be there in Israel, like the last one, in which the former Prime Minister Lapid went to the UN and said, I believe in the two-state solution. So a new government may deal with it if we can really put off the issue of evacuation of the settlements and find a solution for that.
But you're saying quite clearly, Yossi, that the current government, which is the most far right in Israeli history, is not the kind of government that could actually begin to contemplate this kind of change.
I'm not sure.
No way. It doesn't even pay a lip service for peace. They say that they would like, or many of them are saying that they would like to annex the territories, which is the end of Israel. It's a Jewish and democratic state. I mean, how can people who say that they are patriotic, something like that, I don't know, but this is the situation. So Israel right now is not a partner for peace with the Palestinians, regretfully.
Yossi, bear with me, please. Let me just remind people about the Abraham Accords. They've recalibrated the relationship between Israel and 4 Arab states, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, signed on September the 15th, 2020 in Washington. They were Morocco too. They were negotiated under the wing of the US, i.e. the Trump administration at the time. Now, since the Abraham Accords were signed, there's been a notable change of policy from a chief supporter of the Palestinian cause at one time. That's Saudi Arabia welcoming the first openly Israeli delegation on its soil just 4 days ago. Huda, can I bring you in to talk about that situation, whether that has changed things for the worse for the Palestinian cause, of course. Once upon a time, perhaps the Palestinians could have counted on Saudi Arabia as a solid pillar of support. Now that seems to be crumbling. Is there a sense that what is happening around the Palestinians on either side, Gaza, West Bank, is leaving them feeling they've been kind of isolated?
Absolutely. I think it's, when the Palestinians decided to sign Oslo Accords, that was a historic recognition of the Palestinians, of the right of the Jewish people to have their own state. We gave them that legitimacy. So I see Abraham Accords as a byproduct of what the Palestinians have already done. Now we are in a situation that if we acknowledge the Abraham Accord, we are accused of being normalizers, although we were the ones who started that kind of normalization. But when Trump administration came to picture, they completely isolated the Palestinian Authority. And I heard Ofer, I appreciate the positive note there, but if he hears himself, he would know that it's more gains to the Israelis rather than to the Palestinians. And it's not the fault of the Palestinians alone or the Israelis alone. There is no blaming and shaming here. I think it's important to recognize that because of the lack of engagement with the Palestinians as a leadership and as people, the Palestinians feel that they are not included in any decisions made. And they are also not being included in any kind of progress that takes place forward. And I think this is, one of my red flags is that the now, and how the now is affecting the youth, which is the future of both Palestine and Israel. And if we look at the polls, they are extremely alarming. The lack of respect and the lack of equal negotiation processes, or even engagement, or international intervention, it's getting the most extreme among us on both sides to be more empowered. And this is very fearful. Still, the Palestinians believe that the most strategic decision they made is to engage in a peace talks with the Israelis, and they fought for it. Remember, we started under the Jordanian umbrella, and then we became very legitimate to sit equally on the table and talk with the Israelis. So we don't want to lose all of that, but we have no partner.
And is that why, Huda, I think you've already hinted this already, that there is a sense among young people in the Palestinian territories that they have no voice, that they have no representation, that what they think doesn't matter. And is this why we're seeing people resorting to violence? Is this basically what is spurring it all on?
I mean, violence breeds violence. I drive on road 60 on daily basis, going to meet with Israelis, trying to find ways in order to I use the word very carefully here, non-violently co-resist the systems that wants us to be enemies. But you cannot continue believing in something when there is a gun pointed at you, even when you are doing nothing. I know how much every Palestinian struggle on daily basis in order to get home safely. I know mothers losing their children. They don't want to lose their children. They don't send them to stab or throw stones. And remember, we are the ones who have no guns. Yes, we are being lumped under one category, which is Hamas, which is not also representative, but it's getting more and more power in the field, on the ground, because there are no peace indicators. Literally, we have no partner. We knew that since 1995, and we continue to believe that we could have a partner, but still we don't. So what youth have in order to believe in, to know that there is a future? Settlements, Israeli military raids, killing of Palestinians, sometimes with no justification whatsoever. I mean, this is a challenge for the Palestinians on daily basis to convince the young generation that there is an opportunity for a different future.
Huda, thank you very much indeed. Michael Kobi in Jerusalem. Can I bring you back in from the INSS? Huda, I think, giving a real representation of why many Palestinians are unhappy. Do you think Israel can make the changes to enable the kind of negotiation, the kind of living together, the kind of coexistence that is necessary to happen, to allow something that comes down to a two-state solution? Do you think it is possible at all?
In a very limited manner. I do agree that the current Israeli government is not the ultimate, I would say, candidate to take the process further. But in the very same time, I would like to mention and to emphasize that this current government stressed officially, or at least published officially, something like 3 weeks ago, a decision that was made by the Security Cabinet about the necessity to strengthen the Palestinian Authority, to stabilize the Palestinian Authority, because a strong, viable, and functioning Palestinian Authority is an Israeli interest. And this is the current, extreme coalition or government, which means that even the extremists understand that the existence of the Palestinian Authority, I would say, is the less worst option that we have here in the sphere, and therefore it is an essential interest to keep it alive, functioning, strong, viable, and stable. But in the very same time, I'm very sad to hear things that have been stated here by Oda, and I feel that this is a very cheap propaganda, unfortunately. Because to describe the Palestinian society or the Palestinian people as so innocent and so fragile, is something which is disconnected from the reality. First of all, according to all of the polls, mainly Khalil Shkaki's poll, Hamas is the most popular faction even in the West Bank, not only in the Gaza Strip, which means that there is a very broad public support in Hamas. And everybody knows and understands that Hamas doesn't believe in any peace process with Israel. Hamas is a terror organization which actually perceives itself as the spearhead of the armed resistance against Israel. And actually Hamas, together with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, together with the Iranians and Hezbollah, are fueling all the terror campaign in the West Bank since May 22.
Michael, can I stop you there and give Huda a chance to reply to that, because she needs to have a right to reply. Huda Barakov, can you come back on what Michael just said there, please?
Again, I think Michael didn't hear me, and I know him very well, Kobe. I know you. You know me. The thing is, I think what you're saying is right. Because of the situation, Hamas is getting more power, just like how Israel ended up having this government. By the way, it's the best thing that happened to the Palestinians. It's the best PR. But I'm not saying here that we are all innocent. I mean, who can be innocent in a situation like ours? Come on, you guys. You elected this government. It's not us who elected this government. Is this not a response to the lack of faith in peace process and having a partner?
Michael, do you want to come back on that one, please? Michael Kobe.
Yes, look, we are talking about the current situation without bringing the broader context, and as if we are now starting the Oslo process, okay? And I think that we have to remember that one of the main problems that we have from the first beginning of the process was the idea that there were some very significant gaps between both sides with regard to the approaches and with regard to the destination. Okay, the Israeli approach was a very, I would say, real estate territorial security approach. And Israel, mainly Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, perceived the Oslo process as a platform that, first of all, will enable to keep the Zionist project, which means a majority of Jews in the territory of the state of Israel, and at the very same time as a platform for improving security and stop controlling the daily life or having the responsibility for the daily life of the Palestinians. But this was not the Palestinian approach. The Palestinian approach was a much more historical narrative approach. They saw the Oslo process as a platform for reviving the Palestinian ethos, mainly the component of the right of return. The Palestinian leadership, from Arafat to Abu Mazen till these days, were not mainly focused on establishing and building an independent functioning Palestinian state, but on the contrary, okay? The only Palestinian figure that was really interested in building a Palestinian functioning state was Salam Fayyad, but unfortunately, he was thrown by the old guard of Oslo, Abu Mazen, and the circles around Abu Mazen. And we are dealing with a semi-state entity, which is a failed entity from the first beginning, and unfortunately Israel and the international community facilitated and helped this entity to be a failed entity, which lost its legitimacy.
Michael, let me pause you, please, Michael, and bring in here in the studio Ofer Bronstein, former advisor to Yitzhak Rabin, now currently Emmanuel Macron's envoy on the Israeli-Palestinian situation. We heard Michael's comments there about Yitzhak Rabin's involvement. What did that sort of make you think?
Listen, I think that it's important to look forward. To look backward, we can analyze the situation from now to next year, and it won't bring us nowhere. And I'm looking forward. One of the catastrophes that the Israeli and the Palestinians are facing since the second Intifada in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, is that, let's not forget, Israeli cannot go to Palestinian territories anymore. It's forbidden by law. And let's not forget that the only Palestinians that can come to Israel are the workers. So that limit very strongly the possibility of an interaction between the two populations. And our enemies are poverty and ignorance. And if poverty will still be so hard and so difficult on the Palestinian, let me give you a couple of numbers. The average income per capita in the Palestinian, in the West Bank side, it's around $3,500. The average income per capita in Gaza, it's around $2,500 a year. In Israel, it's around $50,000. The gap is huge.
It's a massive difference.
It's a massive difference. So if we are not going to work on, democracy, live on a middle-class society. You don't have so much the middle class among the Palestinians. And in Israel, even in Israel now, the middle class is becoming narrower and narrower. So we have to work on this field, and we have to encourage, one of the big mistakes, and we have to do a mea culpa. I think that Rabin was killed by an extremist, then was pushed by extremists, then some of them are in power today, which they killed him a second time with the part of this new government. But he got killed because we didn't know how to protect him as well. I think that we didn't know how to protect the peace and small achievement that we had as well. I think that the Palestinians don't do enough to protect the assets that we have. And I want to remind Uga, it's true that the Israeli voted for this government with the small differences, but the last election that took place among the Palestinians massively voted for the Hamas. It was a democratic choice than they did. They voted for Abu Mazen for president, but they voted for the Hamas in the parliament. So it was a Palestinian choice to vote for the Hamas. And maybe it's good, because today's Israeli society understand that the right wing and the extreme right wing, beside of inciting to violence and having crazy position on many fields, not only on this one, they cannot bring anything to the Israeli. And I think that the Israelis are waking up to it, and they understand it. When I see 300,000 Israeli every day, every week in the street for the last 6 months, I'm optimistic about the Israeli society. It's going to
the protests about the proposed reforms to the judiciary you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I see among all these young protesters, people are talking about peace.
Indeed.
People are talking about the place of religion in politics. People are talking about their future. So it's a good sign. And the Palestinians who voted for the Hamas, they understand that the Hamas brought them to $200 and $500 income per year. We understand that 60% of the young Palestinians in Gaza are unemployed. So the Hamas did not deliver what he was promising. So I think that one of our mistake and one of our challenge, the peace making cannot be in the hand of a small Israeli and Palestinian elite. So far, it was an elite. People who know how to speak in English, because Palestinian and Israeli don't speak Hebrew. The one who speak Hebrew on the Palestinian side are the one who were in Israeli jails, or the one who are coming to work in Israel. But the elite doesn't speak Hebrew. And it was very convenient for all of us to meet in Brussels, to meet in Washington, to meet in Paris, to travel the world, and to have a point in our frequent traveler cards. We did not make enough efforts to trickle down what we believe in. I tried, when I was living in Israel over 20 years ago, to bring religious people to Arafat, to bring settlers to Arafat, to bring right-wing people to Arafat. And the language that Arafat was having toward them was absolutely a peaceful language. It was absolutely a language that we could understand. And it's absolutely, today we have to make an effort on both society to go down, to speak to the young people who did know Oslo Agreement, to speak to the young Israeli who don't know the Palestinian. They have to meet one each other. They have to touch one each other, and they have to dream and to start forge a common future for both people, because something is not going to change. Between the river and the Mediterranean, you have today 15 million people. No one is going nowhere. It will be a two-state solution. It will be a confederation, like Yossi spoke about. It will be a containization of the situation. It will be a one-state solution. I don't know. But they will have to find a way to live in good neighborhood relationship and to live in peace. And I'm very optimistic about both societies, and we will go in this direction. I want to remind you about one thing about President Macron. In the last year, he is the only leader in the world. He met twice the Israeli Prime Minister. Once it was Yair Lapid, and the second one, 3 months ago, it was Mr. Netanyahu. He met Mr. Abbas twice. He's meeting, and I won't go into all the Israeli and Palestinian, that he's meeting secretly as well and quietly, but it's really, 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 and this position is very clear. So listen, the Palestinians are calling me every day, They said you should recognize a Palestinian state. The Israelis are calling me every day, but telling me you should recognize Jerusalem as our capital. And my answer to them, it's as long as you will come together to me, I will go forward with you. We have a role to play in Europe. We have a role to play. We should not leave the American playing alone in this territory. We are going to play it.
Interesting the role that France could play. Offer, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Yossi Berlin. We're getting towards the end of the debate here, but I'm hoping to get the comments from everybody if we can. Yossi Berlin, a negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Sir, your participation in this programme lifts the content and the meaning of what we're talking about, and we really appreciate it. Yossi, can I ask you whether you feel today that the two-state solution is basically finished as an idea? Or do you think, from what Offer was saying, that there is still that possibility if people come together to negotiate and people come together to talk, that it is still possible?
Of course, the two-state solution is possible. I mean, I suggested what we are doing about it in order to allow the decision makers to accept, to fulfill this dream and to make it a reality. It is the interest of the Palestinians to fulfill their right for self-determination. They deserve it, they should have it, and they need it, they want it. For Israel, if Israel wants to be a Jewish and democratic state, it must have an eastern border. And if it doesn't want to do it unilaterally, as it was done in Gaza, we will have to have an agreement with the Palestinians. And the Palestinians means an agreement, as we did it in Oslo, with the PLO. If Israel is ready to give up on its self-identity, God forbid, if it wants to do that, then it will do nothing. And the current situation is an ongoing process in which we almost have a one-state solution. And it is bad for the Palestinians and very bad for the Israelis.
Yossi, thank you very much indeed. Huda, we've got no time, but I'm offering you 15 seconds for a final comment. Huda.
I think we need to approach this from an optimistic point of view. I think we need a holistic approach for peace. We need to redefine security so it's more interdependent. Israelis are secured, then the Palestinians are secured, and vice versa. I think we need to support the civil society more in order to hold the space when there is a vacuum in leadership. And I think we need to use the opportunity to give more space for peace in Palestine and Israel by getting more people engaged in the peace talks and processes and dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda, joining us from Hebron. Huda Abu Rakab from the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Thanks to Michael Kobi from Jerusalem, from the INSS. Offer, quick one, go on quickly.
Yeah. I do believe that the Israeli and the Palestinian alone won't be able to achieve peace. We saw it on the American war in it, and now I'm telling you that it's the role of Europe to maybe oblige them, push them, convince them to go for it. Alone, they won't be able to do it.
Offer, I've got to end there. Thank you. Emmanuel Macron's peace envoy for Israel-Palestine. Thanks to Michael Kobi, joined us from Jerusalem, from INSS. Thanks again to Yossi Berlin.
Thank you very much.
One of the negotiators.
Happy New Year to all my Jewish friends.
And thank you to Offer again for joining us here in this France 24 debate. Most of all, thanks to you for watching. Stay with us. More to come here at France 24.